Okay, The Batman has been out for a couple months now. As we all know, it was an amazing movie and one of the best comic book movies of all time, in my opinion. Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson was a match made in heaven, both visually and writing-wise. It was one of the best movies of the year so far. The sequel was confirmed a few weeks ago, and although we don't know much about it, I'm assuming it will come out sometime in 2024. Fans have been dropping their suggestions for who should appear in these movies and who their fan cast are. I'm gonna be honest, some of them are utter trash. I saw one guy say that Batman should die in the sequel and Robin should take over, which is really just bare stupidity. I already made my video with my suggestions for the villains that could appear in future movies, but here's how I personally think the sequel should be done. In The Batman, Bruce's main character arc was realizing that vengeance wasn't exactly the answer anymore. Yes, he was angry at the death of his parents and the criminals that caused it, but going around declaring that he was doing this all because of revenge had set a bad example. His actions had inspired people like the Riddler and his followers, which we saw when one of the Riddler goons said, "I'm vengeance," and then looked at Batman. Batman realized that he had to become a symbol of hope instead at a time when Gotham needed him most. Being a creature of the night wouldn't help anymore when Gotham was underwater and its people needed more than just an angry vigilante wailing on criminals at 3 a.m. in dark alleys. That may have been the main character development that Bruce went through, but another major part of his character in the movie was fear. Batman used fear as a weapon against the criminals of Gotham. His opening scene pretty much portrayed this perfectly, with thugs being scared of their own shadows, basically. They cowered away from the dark, even when he wasn't around. It was the perfect representation of what Batman had done to them. Later on though, when Alfred gets blown up, Bruce realizes that he still hadn't completely conquered fear. He was still afraid of losing his loved ones. Alfred may not have been his official father, but he basically raised him. It took him almost dying for Bruce to truly appreciate what he meant to him. Fear was only a background part of the story though. In the Batman sequel, I think it should be the main focus. The Batman had some cool lines about fear. For example, "Fear is a tool. When that light hits the sky, it's not just a call, it's a warning." Batman weaponizes fear so much that it will be interesting to see it used against him in the sequel. I think Scarecrow should be the main villain of the movie. Of course, we got a Scarecrow before in live action back in the Dark Knight trilogy, but as a character, he wasn't as interesting as he could have been. In Batman Begins, he was just a guy working for Ra's al Ghul. In The Dark Knight, he had the same motives as pretty much any common criminal. In Dark Knight Rises, not much changed. Murphy's Scarecrow was pretty creepy and scary, yes, but his writing wasn't anything too special. In the comics, Jonathan Crane is a man that was relentlessly bullied as a child. He was skinny and pretty much the perfect image of a nerd, which obviously led to a rough time at school growing up. He decided to fight back, and one day in his late teens, he committed his first murder when he scared one of his bullies, causing them to have an accident. Crane began to love the feeling of scaring people, and not long after, it became his main thing when he transformed into the Scarecrow. One thing Scarecrow likes doing is studying the way fear works. We know this already, of course, because of his fear gas. In the Batman sequel, it would be interesting if Crane decides to study Batman as well. Batman is widely known for using fear to keep the criminals of Gotham under control. It's common knowledge, and it's part of what inspired the Riddler, as I said before. Batman told him that you can get what you want through fear. Crane would start testing his fear gas on people all over Gotham before finally he would catch Batman's attention. Like he said in The Batman, Bruce still has an overwhelming fear of losing the ones he loved. After walking into the first fight unprepared, Batman gets hit with the gas and of course, he's assaulted with images of dead Alfred, dead Catwoman, Gotham in flames, and it's all his fault. Batman crawls back to the Batcave, defeated for now with the hallucinations still rampant in his mind. The first thing he does is try to find out Scarecrow's identity. The second thing he does is try to find an antidote for the fear gas. News starts to spread of a wounded Batman somewhere in Gotham. Maybe late night travelers had seen him stumbling through the streets, screaming and shouting. Either way, the news of a person that had struck down the Dark Knight reaches the ears of our old friend Ozzy from the Batman. Penguin may have escaped punishment for his crimes in the Batman, but he wasn't finished terrorizing Gotham or Batman just yet. By this point, the Penguin show will have already came out, so we already have his origin story and how he rose to power in Gotham. He's an established big-time crime boss, and it makes sense that Batman would be getting under his skin. Penguin gets the word out. Find the man who was able to bring Batman to his knees. Crane hears about this, and of course, he takes the opportunity. Working with a major crime boss was the perfect way to expand his research and study Batman. His experiments also cost a lot of money since he needed ingredients that weren't exactly cheap for his gas. Why not make some money on the side? Scarecrow met with Penguin and they began to craft their plan. Meanwhile, Bruce had managed to trace the identity of Scarecrow to one man, a former scientist at a research facility where many of the other researchers had mysteriously died about a year ago. Bruce began to dig into the background of Jonathan Crane, trying to find anything he could that could help him fight the man that had turned his own biggest weapon against him. He identified some of his old classmates from high school and decided to track them down to see what they knew about Jonathan Crane. As he found them one by one though, he was shocked to find that they were each dead. 17 of them mysteriously died within the same 6-month time span. Bruce finally found one that was alive, but he was completely traumatized. He kept mumbling about fire, demons, and scarecrows. Bruce knew for sure that Crane was Scarecrow now. These people had been the ones that harassed and bullied him back in school. They were probably hit with the same gas that he was and weren't able to survive it. The only one that did was barely sane and completely paranoid. Bruce decided to set a trap for Crane. He would use the only survivor, a man named Alan Boston, and trick Crane into coming after him to finish him off. Alfred questioned Bruce using a mentally unwell, innocent man as bait to catch one criminal, but Bruce shut him down, claiming that it was necessary. Crane's trauma-filled past was the only way Bruce believed that he could control and manipulate him. There was no room for error when dealing with a man as dangerous as Crane. Bruce promised that he would be careful with Alan, and he swore that the man would make it back alive. Meanwhile, Scarecrow and Penguin had hatched their plan. They would draw Batman out into the open with a night full of crime and savagery in Gotham. Thugs would flood the streets and completely wreck the city, forcing Batman to finally leave the Batcave again after days in solace, recovering from the incident with Scarecrow. When Batman finally came out, Scarecrow would hit him with the fear gas, and then Penguin would unleash his weapon on him, an assassin by the name of Deathstroke. Slade Wilson was a mercenary in the prime of his career. He was well known and feared around the world for his perfect track record. He had never failed a single mission, and his next target was Gotham's Dark Knight. Penguin had promised him an unbelievable sum for him to capture the Batman, and he was ready to complete his mission. Meanwhile, Bruce had finished his antidote and was ready to set out. Before he could put his plan into motion, though, he was alerted to the madness that had just begun in Gotham. Store windows being shattered, people everywhere being mugged, shootings and stabbings left and right, car crashes and random beatings. Think of your average night in Gotham and then multiply it by 2 or 3. Batman rushed from the Batcave and took over the streets of Gotham, sweeping from place to place and doing the best he could to keep order in the city, but he wasn't enough by himself. For hours, he rampaged through Gotham, bashing heads and helping the cops lock up whoever they could get their hands on. Finally, just a few hours before the sun would begin to rise, Batman was leaping over the rooftops when he was suddenly shot down and sent tumbling into the alley below. He didn't know where the shot came from, and his armor protected him from injury, but it did enough to knock him from the sky. As he struggled to his feet, he noticed the person standing above him. Creepy mask, scarecrow outfit, skinny frame. It was Jonathan Crane. Before Batman could react, Crane sprayed him with the fear gas again, and he was overcome with the horrible visions and hallucinations. He tried to fight it off and reach for his antidote, but before he could, he was assaulted by none other than Deathstroke. It was him who shot Batman down from a few rooftops away before rushing over when he was hit with the gas. Slade was only 6'5" and wearing his orange armor, but in Bruce's infected mind, he was a 10-foot-tall demon. Batman made an attempt to fight Deathstroke and he put up a respectable struggle, but he was in no state to take on the skilled assassin, and Slade beat him down with relative ease before knocking him out and restraining him. Batman was broke before Penguin, and the crime boss decided to make him an offer. Work for him. Penguin wanted to become mayor of the city, and Batman had become something of a positive symbol in Gotham. If Penguin had the Batman's support, he was almost guaranteed a victory. As Penguin made his offer, the still infected Batman began to slip out of his bonds. He got loose a bit slowly due to his scrambled mind, but when he did, he snatched the antidote from his belt before any of them could react and injected himself. Within seconds, his mind cleared and he stood to his feet, facing Deathstroke. Round 2. The two went back and forth for nearly 5 minutes, so skilled that they couldn't get the upper hand on each other. Slade may have been a super soldier, but Bruce's gadgets helped him stay in the fight whenever it seemed like Slade's strength would overwhelm him. While the two men battled, Penguin escaped. Scarecrow picked up the vial with Batman's antidote and slipped away as well. Deathstroke eventually got the upper hand on Batman, slamming him to the ground by his neck and raising his sword to finish him off, but right before he could, Batman kicked his feet out from under him and met him with an elbow to the face, knocking him out, and he went down. The undefeated mercenary had finally been defeated. The tired and drained Batman retreated to the Batcave. He was sore and bruised, and he had just fought the hardest battle of his life. Scarecrow was still out there though, and even though there were still doubts about using Alan as bait, Bruce decided it was the right thing to do. The trauma from his experiences with the fear gas slightly influenced his choice. The hallucinations he saw when he was hit with the gas terrified him. Batman brought Alan out and released him near the abandoned facility where he first encountered Scarecrow. He wanted to do a direct assault, but he wasn't sure of the protection that someone like him had. Bruce was letting his fear control him. It was changing the way he behaved and making him overly cautious and more cowardly than he ever was. As Alan wandered around, he followed from the shadows. It wasn't too long before Scarecrow emerged from the facility, shocked to see his old classmate still alive. Alan was so horrified by seeing the man that had destroyed his mind that he nearly fainted. Scarecrow restrained the panic-stricken man and dragged them inside the facility. Batman followed. When he got inside, Batman discovered that Scarecrow had created a new fear gas after studying the antidote that Batman made. Bruce contemplated retreating. He knew now that he had no defense against Scarecrow's gas, but he couldn't leave Alan, and this was his opportunity to defeat Scarecrow that he may never get again. Batman emerged from the shadows and tried to catch Scarecrow off guard, but Crane had been expecting him. Batman was hit with a full blast of the new fear gas, and his mind instantly went to shit. Bruce tried his antidote, and just like he expected, it didn't really work. His mind was assaulted with Alfred and Selina dead once more, the bodies of his parents in the alleyway. Gotham burning, and it was all his fault. As Scarecrow pulled out the gun and prepared to press it against Batman's exposed mouth, Batman tried to fight the gas with everything he had. He fought the images of his dead loved ones, and he fought the fear that racked his mind. It was a painfully slow struggle, and Crane soon had the gun loaded and pointed at Batman. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, Batman rose to his feet. His mind was still in shambles, but one thing rose above everything else running through his brain. He had to save Alan. He had brought him here, an ill-advised decision that could cost the man his life. His fear was strong, but his guilty conscience and his will was just stronger. Batman leaped at Scarecrow and knocked the gun from his hand before grabbing the skinny man by his neck and instantly knocking him out with a devastating headbutt that could have knocked the teeth out of a rhino. Crane crumpled to the ground, and so did Batman, who still struggled to rid himself of the gas's effect. It began to wear off in less than half an hour, either because Batman had built up a bit of a resistance or because his antidote was able to at least make it wear off faster, even though it wasn't as effective. Batman brought Alan to a mental institution and took Scarecrow to Arkham, where he was locked up under the care of Hugo Strange. I might make a separate video for this, but I think Hugo should be introduced into Arkham Show as a psychiatrist that handles Batman's rogue gallery in Arkham. I'll talk more about it another day. Deathstroke disappeared after his loss to Batman, his pride wounded and angrier than ever at the Dark Knight. Batman couldn't do anything to Penguin just yet because there was still no proof of his criminal activities. That didn't stop him from paying him a visit though. The movie would end with another monologue from Bruce. This time, he had truly conquered fear, literally overcoming the physical manifestation of it. He had moments of weakness where he forgot who he was, but in the end, he showed who he truly was. There's other parts of this movie that would be important, but this is just the main story. For example, there's the Bruce Wayne aspect. In The Batman, it's addressed that Bruce isn't doing much to help Gotham. He's allowed Batman to completely consume his life and doesn't have time for anything else. He only cares about fighting crime physically, forgetting that he has the means to do it financially too. In this movie, I would show making that step forward. More public appearances as Bruce Wayne. Bruce realizes that he can help Gotham in more ways than just physical violence. He has the means to do it, so he does. At one of his public meetings, he meets Harvey Dent, who was the new DA after Riddler killed the first one in the first movie. I don't think Harvey should become Two-Face in this film. One thing about Bruce and Harvey's relationship that made Long Halloween so impactful was how close Harvey and Batman were, to the point that Batman was considering telling him his identity. His transformation into Two-Face really hurt Batman and Gordon. It's the reason Two-Face is one of Batman's best villains. In the comics, Harvey became Two-Face when Sal Maroni threw acid on him at his trial. Currently, Sal Maroni is still in jail waiting for trial after Falcone ratted him out. Let the Batman sequel build Bruce and Harvey's relationship before having the trial in the third movie. Hush was heavily hinted at in the first movie. Edward Elliot, the reporter that Falcone killed for Thomas Wayne, is an ancestor of Thomas Elliot in the comics. In Riddle's video about the murder, the words Hush appeared on the screen in big letters. I personally don't think Hush should appear in the sequels because back-to-back movies about the sins of the father wouldn't exactly be ideal. I can see him as a side villain in the future though. Robin is another character that many people want to appear, but I don't think they should do that just yet. Batman knew a lot of his rogues before he brought in Grayson. Part of why Bruce struggled to take in Grayson was the sheer amount of batshit insane criminals that he had to face. He even fired Grayson once because of a violent encounter with Two-Face. I think Robin should come in during the third movie, when Batman has already faced a few of his most major rogues and everyone is a little more established. I don't think Joker should be in this movie either. Let him stay in the Arkham show. The Batman movies need other villains to get a little spotlight for now. There's been an absurd amount of Jokers. The first Batman movie was amazing, and I definitely trust Matt Reeves to make more good ones. He's one of my favorite directors ever, and he already has one of the best trilogies ever in Planet of the Apes. Whenever the Batman 2 comes out, I have faith that it'll be a great movie. This is just what I would personally do if I was making it. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you would want to see if you were making the Batman 2. New video coming real soon, and thank y'all for watching.